Hey, welcome back. My name is Al, and today we're going to sculpt the dragon head. Just know anytime we actually sculpt something, it's not going to be a step-by-step tutorial. You are going to do different things than I will. I will take a different approach than you, and that's okay. The next Zbrush artist that you watch do a dragon head or whatever, they're going to do it a different way, and that's okay. We're going to basically sculpt the whole thing out of a sphere, more or less. We'll add separate objects for the teeth. But before we do that, we really need to talk about primary forms. So when you have a really cool sculpt like this is not mine. Just look up ZBrush Dragon time lapse. This is like the most popular one, you know. I'm sure you've actually seen it. Sometimes when we look at these sculpts or we're trying to replicate a sculpt or concept art, there are lots of details. Like we've got all these cool scales, these cracks, the wrinkles in the eyes. The sculpt might actually have different colors and textures, and that can be very distracting. So we need to look at the primary forms of what this object is. So it's like the building blocks of, you know, this image that our eyes are seeing. When I take off my glasses, things get very blurry. Like I can no longer see the scales very well. So that would be comparable to something like, actually, let's go to this one. Filter, blur. That might be a little intense, but you know, it's making the point. So I can't really, oopsies. So I'm not saying like you should blur out your reference images every time you sculpt. This is just trying to make the point of, hey, let's forget all these cool scales. All the wrinkles have basically disappeared. You can see some of them, but you get the point. So now we can very clearly see that we have this primary shape for this whole object. I'm like kind of dodging scales, things like that. Primary forms for this whole object. Now, obviously, primary forms, if I'm going to do this piece by piece, would probably be something like that for the horns. This guy, probably something like that. So let's go back to our original drawing. So this is a rough draft of our dragon. It's just got the very basic shapes, and it's going to look really stupid. And that's all right. Secondary form. After I block out this dragon, he's going to look really silly, but I am just focused on proportions. I want to make sure that this head is roughly this size compared to the body, which is this size, and the horns are compared, you know, roughly the right proportions. That's the goal. This is the rough draft, but this is also the foundation. So this part is super important. The next phase would be secondary forms. So secondary forms would be, we've got this whole thing, which once again would probably be a primary form here, but we've got the smaller kind of striations in this thing, the smaller lumps. Secondary forms in this case might be the scales, these giant scales back here, not the tiny minuscule ones, these large scales, these plates. It would be the brow, none of the wrinkles, just the brow, basically separating this jaw. Yeah, and we'll keep the teeth separate. This would be better shaping of this bottom portion with some of these spikes. And then if you wanted to, these smaller spikes at the top, it's really user preference. But the idea is like we take what we have and then we add to it, we alter it, we dive a little bit deeper into some of those finer details. And then, you know, the final step are those tertiary details. So these skin folds, all of that, all of the tiny, tiny scales, all of this fun stuff, all comes together. The wrinkles, all of it will come together to make this wonderful dragon. So this looks like a giant mess. Hopefully it'll make more sense when we get into ZBrush. Okay, so this is called PureRef. If you don't have PureRef, it's just awesome, awesome tool. It's free. You are going to type in PureRef, go to download, scroll down. You are going to pick a custom amount, pick $0. Boom, download. This is what you get. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete this. One of the neat things about PureRef, what you can do is we have our Google open here, and you're just gonna left click and drag images into PureRef. Mouse wheel to zoom in and out, right click and drag to move the whole thing, middle mouse click and drag, and you will pan inside of here. Then we can scale these images up and down. One thing you're going to have to do is right click, go down to mode, and just pick always on top. If that is not checked, that means as soon as I click in ZBrush, it goes behind my ZBrush, which is not useful at all. So I'm going to right click, mode, always on top, and then, you know, anything I do in ZBrush, it's going to stay right there. If you have two monitors, you could just move this to your other monitor and make it full screen and just have a whole reference board full of dragons or anything else. In this case, I'm literally just using this dragon. So let me make this a little smaller, something like that. Hold it, right click, move it up there, just so it's kind of out of the way. And then you can right click, go to save as. We're going to save this scene. These are all my pure refs. We'll just save this as dragons. So we'll just save it as dragons, save. There we go. The next time I open pure ref, this is what you'll do. Search for pure ref and then right click, go down to open recent or open, and then go open up your file. So all these images are going to save within this pure ref file, which is pretty dope and super helpful. Now that we have this, let's go ahead and start. I'm going to go to Lightbox just like we've always done, grab the Dynamesh sphere, and let's begin. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is primary forms, just making it out of a sphere. Nothing wrong with that. So I am going to do this very rough. These are primary forms. So I'm going to use Snake Hook, make sure Sculpt Pro is on. My symmetry is on. If your symmetry is not on, go to transform, activate symmetry, giant draw size. I'm going to rotate my camera. While I'm rotating, I'm holding shift. That's going to snap. If you need to use this little guy, the little head, you can, because it just always snaps when you left click and drag. So I have this nice side view, giant brush, and I'm going to pull out this kind of snake-like shape. So I'm pretending that that is the head. This part kind of tapers, so Snake Hook naturally does that when I pull that out. That's pretty great. Let's come back here. If you have too small of brush size and you do that, you're going to have two separate sections, so just keep that in mind. I just have a giant draw size. Let's bring that up and down. So if we're comparing these two, here's kind of the head. It ain't perfect. Here is this portion. So it goes up and then kind of comes down. It went down a little too far. And then this is too thin. So I'm gently just pulling this down. Something like that. I can smooth out that little tail at the end. And there we go. We have a phallic dragon, and we are well on our way to being less than phallic. That's the hope, at least. We have this part, which is represented here, and then this portion kind of comes down further. This is much higher, so it's kind of, you know, kind of something like that. I don't necessarily like this angle. This angle looks a lot less steep, so mine just kind of falls off the cliff, so I'm going to bring that up. And now I have this nose section. I'm going to tuck that in because it's kind of like squarish. Something like that. Yes, and that's not super great, but so let's go ahead and get those primary horns in, so it comes up and then down and then up. But I am gonna save myself some trouble instead of using Snake Hook on there, because when you're using one mesh, it's a pain in the butt. So mine is already going to be a little bit different than the reference, and that's going to be all right. Okay, so something like that. Is it great? Nope, looks pretty stupid. I'm going to make this a little larger coming out. And I'm going to tuck this kind of in, because to me, this part down here looks like the little flappy bits on his neck. So we're just gently pushing those closer towards the center. Just kind of all the way down. Okay, if you end up making a mistake, this is not really a mistake, but you need to make some adjustments. Move topological is good for that, because it's not going to screw up any detail that you have. So right now I'm looking at this kind of swoop. I don't really love that. So let's use this brush to come in here and make that happen a little bit better. It seems very flat because it is very flat. So let's inflate this guy, and then I can hold shift to smooth. back to that move topological. Okay. Something like that. That'll be fine. Next up, I need to add some landmarks. So we'll call primary forms done. Let's go to clay buildup. I like to change the alpha to alpha 6. Landmarks. Here's this little guy on like this ridge top. And then there's this valley down below, something like that. So you, with your eyes, look out into the distance and you see this little ranger tower. And you say, okay, we've got trees all along here, but I know I need to head towards that ranger tower. So as soon as you start getting down here in the valley, you can no longer necessarily see everything, but every once in a while, you're going to be able to look up through the trees and see this ranger tower, and you just know you're heading in the right direction. That is the way you need to go. So that's what we're doing. This is a landmark. That's what we're doing with sculpting. We need a landmark. If we don't have a landmark, we don't really know where all the pieces are, and we don't know where to go. So the landmark that I'm going to do first, we're just going to look at the head here. We've got an eye. Here is the base of that, which is here. So we have something right there. Down and to the right of that, so down to the right, I'm going to carve in, just very rough, this kind of oval shape. And then we've got some lumps right above it. There we go. That, somewhere right there is where the eye needs to be. Next up, let's do the nostril. The nostril kind of comes straight and slightly lower right here. There's some sort of nostril that goes right there. Next up, let's use dam standard. And let's get some sort of mouth in here. And we're going to say that thing goes all the way up there. So it's going to start at the front. And it is just going to go up. And then it kind of goes something like that. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And it's going to stop, you know, close to where I got it right there. Does that look great? No, it still looks very stupid. But that's okay. But now I have some of these landmarks in here. And I can say, oh, well, this is where the mouth goes. This is where the nostril goes. Let's use those landmarks so we can make something happen. Now, don't be discouraged if yours doesn't look exactly like this. Mine's not even going to look exactly like that. That's okay. We're going to start with a larger clay buildup and just start kind of scribbling out some lumps. This whole section is a little thicker than this. So I'm going to come in here and do something similar. Let's go ahead, pull that out with my clay buildup brush. I'm making stroke, stroke, stroke after stroke. Something like that. The nose, you know, it looks very flat right now. So let's go ahead and do something like that. So it's got a nostril. We will dive into the eye a little bit more. I'm going to carve that out more. So I'm just holding Alt to carve in. I know I'm going to place an eyeball there at some point. And it needs to be more pointed. Mine was very round. So I'm just making that kind of football shape in there. Larger draw size. There we go. Don't be afraid to use move topological. If I use snake hook at this point, like a large brush size, it destroys that detail. That's where I would recommend move topological, because I can adjust these sections and shape this a little bit better. So I'm going to bring that down and always rotate around your mesh. So it might look good there. You rotate and it's like, oh crap, that doesn't look good at all. That's fine. So we'll just pull that out some more. There we go. Rotate around your mesh. It might look okay here. Let's rotate this direction and just do some giant changes. I feel like this dragon really needs to have more of a tapered snout kind of thing like that. Okay, let's do the same thing. Let's grab this kind of lower jaw, pull that way out. All right, cool. Now let's add these little extra little horn fur looking things. We're just going to do something like that and out. I hit the mouth there, so let's come down. Feel free to mask if you really want to. So I'm just masking off that section. That way I don't accidentally press it. And then I can grab something like this. Let's go down here, up and down. In this example, since I'm using all one mesh, it's important that I just kind of pull these little tendrils out from the body a little bit. Like I said, it's going to make my life so much easier than doing something like, well, that would work, but like this. This one comes out and up and down. Okay, I would be able to inflate those if I want. We're on our way. This section that came down actually needs to be behind the eye, so that was a mistake that I did. I'm going to clear my mask, Control. We're going to go over here to move, and I'm just going to grab that and gently nudge this whole kind of thing back. Don't be afraid to like screw up. So if it's not going to work pulling this back, just come in here. I mean, you can hold Shift to smooth, or just hold Control, or I'm sorry, hold Alt, and we're just going to carve that out, and we're just going to fill that space in with normal clay buildup. We're just going to try that again. So let's go back to our damn standard. Let's just draw that a little bit better. So we're going to say this comes straight back. When I get past the eye, let's go a little lower. Past the eye, let's come down and up and that way. I'm going to continue using this damn standard brush to separate some of these forms down here. I'm not really going to pay too close attention, but like separate, you know, something like that. Could come in and start separating. Actually, let's use snake hook for some of those. Some of these like little spikes back there. I can hold Shift to smooth those out. They kind of do this little swoop up. So I'm going to push those in, something like that. And let's break up some of the scales. So for that, let's use damn standard. And this kind of just starts here, swoops, kind of like this S shape. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to head this direction, then head that direction, and then there needs to be this line across. So I can actually use damn standard as like kind of just sketching. So somewhere in between here and there needs to be this line. So I can just come in here and just kind of sketch in that line. And that's once again just going to be a guide. These little plates, they just kind of come up and then head straight up, and then they kind of curve that direction. And I'm just going to repeat that process to get some guides in here. Let's head this direction and S-like shape. We're going to do that again. Okay, we can finish those off right up here. And then lots of ways you can go about doing this. I could use my move brush to come in here and then grab some of that and head that direction, but it's messing up that crease. I could also come in here and just paint carefully this side of that piece of armor. You know, something like that. Tap to make it a little smoother. Hold Control outside your mesh and click. And that's going to allow me to just pull that out just a little bit. Let's go ahead and do all those at the same time. I'm going to use that same approach. I'm just going to get a smaller draw size, hold Control, and I'm just painting this side of things. Actually, I might as well go all the way down. You know, something like that. If I mess up, hold Alt and Control. I can paint that out. There's 1,000 ways to do this. Good enough. Control Alt, get rid of that. All right, so now that I have this, I'm gonna hold Control, tap outside my mesh, so now I have the opposite. This gives me the ability to come in with a giant draw size. So I'm gonna move them kind of down. Actually, let's tap our mask a few times, smooth that out. Then I can just gently kind of pull those scales out. And then I'm gonna rotate and do something similar to like this direction. There we go. Clear my mask, Control left click and drag, and now I've got these scales that I can. Let's turn off Sculptures Pro, come in here and just smooth just a smidge. So it looks like my mesh broke, which is fine. Anytime you have a hole in your mesh, you can just do a Dynamesh command. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna go to Geometry, Dynamesh, press Dynamesh. And mine worked out okay. Just the default resolution, that's all good. I lost a little detail, but it's gonna clean up those holes, fix all the problems. Then we can come in here and separate those forms with that damn standard brush. I'm just being pretty rough with this. The approach I just showed you might be a little tedious, so let me show you maybe a different approach for those scales. Good time to save if you haven't already. Let's do Dragon 1. So I'm going to undo to get back to here. So we're going to do this without masking. Those crevices with a damn standard brush, those were just like kind of my rough draft. So I'm going to start back here because these plates lay on top of each other. So I'm just going to, let's turn on Sculptures Pro. Let's just sculpt, you know, like this. I'm just very quickly back and forth, pulling up that scale. And, you know, it gives me more meat to be able to grab, so to speak. So I could go to move and then just start shaping that scale a little bit better. So there's one scale down. Let's go back to clay buildup, sculpt. So I'm pulling that out. That gives me some separation from the one on the left to this one. Great. I can do the same thing. I could come in here and I can start shaping that scale. And that's sticking out way too far. So let's do something like that. I could do it that way too. It's really up to you. There's so many ways to do this. Let's just go ahead and make this just a little thicker. Let's just skip through this process a little bit. Move brush. Okay, cool. You can see I'm just kind of freely doing this.